and Tristan, thank you for recording. And Tristan Miller, our vice chair, communications chair. These women work so hard, and thank you so much for all the support on this event, ladies. Next slide. I'm going to tell a little bit about my story. So I was born in Santa Ana, and I was born with asthma, and I have wanted clean energy all my life. And that got me into understanding and studying climate change. And when I discovered community choice energy, I was really excited. My father is a business owner, and so I also am a strong supporter of business. And I decided this was something that was possible in Orange County, good for business. And looking all over California, me and many of the environmental groups saw that big change was happening in cities in California that had community choice energy. And we wanted to bring it to Orange County. So for the past several years, we've been active in helping that happen. Next slide, please. And welcome if you're just, oh, I'm sorry, can you go back to the other slide? Yes. And if you're just joining us, please put your name, information, and why you're here in the chat. So I had to show this. This was sent to me from one of our members, Danny Gray, last night. This is last night, June 22nd, Capistrano Beach, our south-facing beaches, we're losing them. I wanted to mention the slide on the right, that retaining wall. We have this delusion that we're going to be able to stop the water. That is less than 100 feet from the train that transports our cargo that comes in every day and goes to Los Angeles in shipping containers. So this is an issue now. Next slide, please.
So,
I'm sorry. So Margot's going to just give you a few minutes about our organization, Climate Reality OC, and then we're going to acknowledge all our VIPs here and then get to our speakers.
And I'm going to stop the share for just a minute because I want to see if, okay, we're good. I wanted to be sure I wasn't missing anybody in the waiting room because I'm not sure that.
I'm letting everybody in.
Okay, good. Thank you. Thank you. So let's go back to this. And so, as Linda said, I am Margot Finlayson. I am the chapter co-chair for Climate Reality OC. And I want to just give you a quick update because I know everybody really wants to get to the presentations. But for those of you who are not familiar with Climate Reality, it is the global nonprofit that was founded by Al Gore in 2006 to expand the conversation he started with an inconvenient truth. And since 2006, over 20,000 global climate leaders have been trained with Al Gore, top climate scientists, and other climate experts. And that training is so incredible because you really come out of it feeling like you have a better understanding of where we are, why we're here, and that there really are some good solutions already available and more in the works. So last year, the Global Climate Leadership Corps completed over 50,000 presentations, webinars, and other climate actions. And here in Orange County, our chapter has over 80 trained leaders that completed over 1,100 climate actions in 2020. We have 220 official members, and our mailing list is over 500. You can learn more on our website, which is here, and as you can see, we really are committed to working collaboratively with communities. We want to work together to solve all of the issues around climate change. What did I want to tell you? Oh, while you're on our homepage, it's www.climaterealityoc.com. Be sure you check out the podcast that was done by Tristan and one of our youth leaders, David Hahn, and take a minute just to take a quick climate action by clicking on the take action.
Yeah, on our action hub.
You can see here that even with going virtual in March 2020, we were able to pivot from giving live presentations and live meetings to change to doing webinars and virtual meetings. And here are a couple of our committees. The Zero Waste Committee did some great webinars on sustainable living and sustainable fashion. And they even created a sustainable gift guide at the end of the year. And our newly formed youth action team, which is youth-led, created 4 next generation compliant, that's the science standard, curriculums for grades K through 8 that are already being used in 3 schools, 2 in Tustin and 1 in LA. And overall, we were just able to continue growing and expand our outreach and partnerships. We are fully committed to working for clean energy. We work with Climate Action Campaign and OC Clean Power, which was the nonprofit that really started working on CCE in Orange County and promoting it, and with other local organizations as well to really support clean energy, community choice, and also city climate action plans. So if you want to know more about this, you can join one of our bi-weekly CCA virtual update meetings on Zoom. They're every other Thursday at 9 a.m. and you can email Linda for the link. It's lkteamtalk@gmail.com. If you don't get that, we'll be putting it in chat, and I'm going to pass it back to Linda so we can get on with the presentations.
Hi, everybody. So Rafael and Jack are going to say a little bit more about community choice energy, but some of you may not be real familiar with it. So I'm going to do 5 minutes. Please understand that there are a handful of us that can give you an hour or longer information on community choice energy. And it's really great. We will meet with you in small groups. If you have a large group you'd like us to present to, ourselves, we can do it. We work with Climate Action Campaign and OC Clean Power, Ian Creation, Kathleen Tresseder, myself, Tristan. There are many of us who can help with that. Right now, I'm just going to do 5 minutes. So community choice energy, sometimes called community choice aggregation, CCE or CCA for short, and you will see those acronyms a lot, is a local not-for-profit public agency that purchases electricity on behalf of its customers. If you see this graph in front of me, which you also see a lot, this is a typical utility graph where the utility, in our case, Southern California Edison, purchases the electricity, which we call the generation of electricity, and then distributes it on the wires, so it's the distribution. Well, these community choice agencies are now purchasing the energy for their customers, and then the profits that normally go to the utility and to the investors now come back in the form of programs to cities. There are no new taxes. It is based on the revenue. Next slide, please. Okay, sorry. Just a quick run through. This is California. There are over 11 million customers. Community choice energy has been around since 2010 when Marin Clean Energy launched. And we have a 93% retention rate, which is a huge rate because customers can go back to their old utilities. In over 200 cities, 23 currently active CCAs in California. Next slide, please. So some of the quick benefits, they'll be talking more about them. Choice, like I said, you can return back to your utility if you don't like it. A local voice, because it's a public entity. They have public meetings, they record their meetings. You can go and make comments and have your voice heard. The rates are competitive, and in general, all of the CCAs have been able to purchase energy for cheaper, and most deliver a rate that is a bit smaller than the utilities. CCAs buy more clean energy, a lot more clean energy, and that is helping the trend up to 10 times. I'll show a graph in a minute of that. It's reinvestment back into the community. They take their profits because they're a nonprofit and they invest them back in the community. And again, I said it's revenue based. Next slide, please. Our Orange County CCA is a JPA, a Joint Powers Authority, called OC Power Authority, or OCPA. It was formed just in December, and it was Irvine was joined by Fullerton, Huntington Beach, and Buena Park. I will say that JPA is the most common type of community choice agency by far, and there are reasons for that. It's less financial risks for the city, and also there's something called economy of scale, where the more energy you can buy and the bigger energy purchases, the cheaper it is for its ratepayers. Next slide, please. A JPA is not uncommon. Our vector control, our fire authority, the Irvine Water District. There are many common JPA structures in Orange County. Next page, please. This graph is a graph from Lake Forest. They hired a consultant to discuss community choice energy in Orange County. He showed that in the next 10 years, it's predicted that SCE's generation rates would be higher than the current community choice agency in Orange County, OCPA. Next slide, please. This is a very important slide. I know it's a little hard to see. Basically, the CCAs are killing it financially. This is last year. 5 CCAs in California last year got increased credit ratings by the credit rating agencies, and this continues in March of 2021 with Marin Clean Power getting their 3rd increased rating and an A rating. So they are doing very well financially. Next slide, please. This is a slide, and thank you to Ayn Creation, who does her research and creates wonderful visuals. It shows, based on the California Public Utilities prediction, that CCAs in the next 10 years will purchase 10 times the renewables that typical utilities purchase. Next slide, please. This is the last slide, and another great slide by Ayn. It's a little hard to understand, but if you see, there's a tiny little line. If you're an individual and you want to make a change, contribution for climate change, and you do the individual actions listed, that's how much this line would be. But if you get your city to go community choice energy, then you will be reducing greenhouse gas emissions by 360 tons of CO2 per year. So important to know why we are excited about this. Next slide, please. Okay, I'm a little behind, so there's lots more to understand, and please let us know. As Irvine estimated, they're going to bring 6 to 10 million back in benefits from their CCA. And I go ahead and stop sharing. I think we're good. I'm noticing we're a little bit behind, so please, if you're just joining, please put your information in the chat. I do want to take a minute to acknowledge some of our VIPs, and we've got a big list. So I was going to read their positions. I'm just going to read their names. Please, if you can, make a wave and then put your information in the chat. So, and I'm going to list who signed up. So we have Antonio Graham, the Chief Operating Officer from OCPA, Peter Levitt, another person from Peninsula Clean Energy who manages the DER strategy, Council members Doug Serbo, Jesse Lopez from Santa Ana said she wanted to attend, County Supervisor Office, Katrina Foley, Adam Arith, our Policy Advisor for Sustainability and Transportation, City staff members Salem Afwerki from Costa Mesa, Sona Coffee, and Sanite Forthall from Irvine, Susan Patterson from Mission Viejo. Active in the CCA adoption process, Dr. Kathleen Treseder. She is a UCI professor who researches and teaches climate change. She's also the founder of OC Clean Power, along with Robin Ganal. Ein Creation is a climate action campaign, very active in CCA advocacy. Derek Sabori was the global sustainability manager at Volcom, and he teaches sustainable fashion at Orange Coast College. Jared Russell is from Impact Tree, and he has helped us develop our action tab on our website. Kyla Villegas from OC Environmental Justice. Other organizations, Jennifer Ward from OC Business Council, Scott Kitcher, the president and CEO of Sustain SoCal, a sustainability and clean tech innovation center located right here in Irvine. And thank you for being here, Scott. I know you had a transportation webinar today. Okay, that's it for me. Without further ado, our next item on our agenda is to have Rafael Reyes from Peninsula Clean Energy speak. And Rafael, I'm going to go ahead and let you share your slides and introduce yourself.
Rafael, you're still muted.
Yes, there we go. That's the inevitable thing these days. Thank you very much, Linda. Really great to be here with such a great group of folks really pushing the needle on clean energy. I'm going to jump into my slides and do a bit of an introduction on myself. One of the things that's cool for me about participating here is that I grew up in Southern California and the city of Orange in particular. I was just down there for a wedding. My oldest nephew got married and had our reception in San Juan Capistrano and a church nearby, and have a ton of family down there. Started my studies at UC Irvine and began my professional career down there before ultimately moving up to the Bay Area. So it's very near and dear to my heart, and it's really cool that there's so much momentum growing around community choice energy. Subsequent to being in Southern California, I ultimately moved to the Bay Area and worked at Hewlett Packard. I started in software development, doing software development, program management, business consulting, before making a career change into the clean energy space. And then most recently, prior to joining Peninsula Clean Energy now just over 3 years ago, I was with a clean tech incubator where I led and supported demonstration projects, emerging technology demonstration projects around the Bay Area. And so was heavily engaged in supporting clean tech startups. So that's a little bit about me. Linda did a great job covering, what community choice energy programs are. So I'm not going to belabor this, but just, again, public agency, not for profit, providing the generation services, which are then distributed on the distribution network that are owned and operated by the local investor-owned utility. And those go out to, of course, that goes out to shared customers. A little bit on the community impact of Peninsula Clean Energy. We've been up and running for 5 years now, which makes us relatively old timers from the standpoint of community choice energy programs. But in that time already delivered an annual estimated savings of $18 million a year to consumers in our service territory, committed over $25 million for local programs. And most recently, importantly, substantial COVID relief to the community. So over $5 million to low-income residents as well as small businesses. Why community choice? This is recapping a couple of the key points that Linda made earlier. So lower utility bills, custom programs that are really oriented to your specific community, and I'm going to talk about that more, and really focused on local investment as opposed to shareholder value, and really driven by local leadership. So yourselves, not, of course, the elected officials who are here, but members of the community who have direct access to the key decisions that are being made. As a public agency, all of the core decision making is public. Anybody can walk into a Peninsula Clean Energy board meeting, offer their input with regards to what they feel is most needed. All the financials are totally transparent. which is quite a departure from our current or previous monopoly investor-owned utility scenarios. Where the headquarters was who knows where, and you couldn't attend the board meeting. It's very difficult to know what's going on, and even more so, the California Public Utilities Commission is heavily involved, and so decision making is over very long time cycles and so forth. So it's very difficult to engage with the investor-owned utilities because of their size and position, which is quite different from a community choice energy program. And then, of course, creating the competitive choice option, which is part of what helps drive both more clean energy and also the price advantages. I want to talk in particular here about transportation. So, there's a lot of discussion around clean energy and community choice energy, in particular around the rates, which is incredibly important. But the big opportunity is really about transportation electrification. And so let me just walk through, the comparison of the economics here. So if you take a look at gas vehicles versus electric vehicles, what does this mean for the local economy? Now, Orange County today spends roughly $1 billion, that's a billion with a B, on gasoline every year. 1 billion gallons of gas and $4 billion on gasoline. Now, if we look at it on the gasoline side of the equation, somewhere around 97% of that is going to the petroleum companies. And that's, for extraction, refining, transportation, and there are some taxes thrown in there, but the overwhelming majority of the funds is going to the petroleum industry. And somewhere around 3% stays local, plus some taxes added on to that. But that 3%, reflects the profit margin that gas stations get out of this, and that's about it, frankly. If you look at the electric side, it's a quite different picture. Every consumer will save anywhere from 50 to even 75% potentially on their fueling costs, which means that whatever, maybe 40 or 50%, and it varies depending on whether you're charging at work or charging at home, and if you're multi-unit dwelling and so forth. But let's just say 40 to 50% of that dollar goes to the generation and distribution services. So some of that would be to the Community Choice Energy Program or your utility. And then the balance stays in people's pockets. So this is the important thing. Over half of the money that goes to fueling stays in people's pockets, which means that then in turn, for the most part, ends up in the local economy or in other parts of the economy. So it's a massive, and we're talking over $2 billion in the case of Orange County. Now that's with a comprehensive conversion of the entire fleet, and that's not going to happen tomorrow. But for San Mateo County, we estimated that by 2025, we're probably talking $50 million a year. Again, $50 million a year just by reaching 45,000 electric vehicles in the county, and we're over halfway there. So it's a huge economic boost. Now, somebody might say, well, yeah, but the IOUs can also do whatever we need to get that done. And it's not really the same. And let me walk through why local programs play such an important role in making this happen. So local program design is really central to what community choice energy agencies can bring to the table. In our case, we do electric vehicle marketing through ride and drives and test drive opportunities and other related engagement marketing. And our partners are the local employers. So we literally pick up the phone, I'm being a little simplistic, but pick up the phone and say, would you like to have an event? And the employers love this because it's a great engagement opportunity. Of course, I'm talking pre-pandemic. here. So we haven't been doing ride and drives for the past year, but it's enormously popular. And so doing events, we've delivered in 3 years over 300 electric vehicle experiences, and self-reported surveys have shown, 17% conversion rate to electric vehicles because of the direct experience of driving an electric vehicle, which is really essential. And again, why does community choice energy fit into this? It's the local partnerships and familiarity with the community that really most successfully drives this activity. Electric vehicle incentives. So we were able to bring incentives to the table, and here again, there are incentives that are provided by the state and the IOUs, and that's fine, that's helpful, that's important. But what we bring to the table is, again, the local partnerships. So we partner directly with social service organizations, credit unions based in our service territory, dealerships based in our service territory, to build a program that included education, finance, and the incentives, which were, and as a package, particularly important for the low-income community, and 385 electric vehicles that have received incentives, and we estimate some $400,000 of savings per year for those vehicles that we help put into the into local service with our community members. EV charging, similar set of issues. Again, there's state program, there's investor-owned utility program, and that's all well and good. That's mostly helpful. But we bring a very distinct angle to this. And again, local partnerships, in this case, local governments, and technical assistance, which is not bound to the business model of an investor-owned utility. So an investor-owned utility makes money by deploying large infrastructure. So needless to say, they like to spend a lot of money on infrastructure. And the investor-owned utilities costs on a per port basis for charging is 3 times the state average for the state incentive program, and our program will come in at an even lower price point. So we're looking for lower install costs by at least 60%, if not more. And part of that comes from a design approach, again, that's not tied to our business model, and the local partnerships where we can engage local governments on things like building codes and permitting and other elements that make the overall program be so successful. I'm going to wrap up here with some other background on Peninsula Clean Energy's overall portfolio. So as you can see, we have a full spectrum of programs covering buildings, transportation, resiliency. So everything from, the appliance incentives for all electric appliances to e-bikes to resilience programs with solar storage systems and the like. And we have roughly a $35 million budget forecast over the next 4 years. And what you can see here is 2/3 of that is in transportation, because the opportunity for benefits, both economic and environmental, is enormous. And to wrap up here, I would say from a startup standpoint, in the early days of a community choice energy program, it's really important to be thinking about building reserves, and to start with programs that are quick, light touch programs, and to look for partnerships. Again, the local partnerships, as well as the other agency partnerships that can help leverage resources. And so things like partner co-marketing around solar, technical assistance programs with EV charging, community events, low-income programs, particularly e-bikes. These are all sorts of things that do not take a lot of money, but can be really driven, incredibly effective by a community choice energy program that is really grounded in the community. And I should just to throw in, for those who are interested in emerging technologies, we're doing a range of pilots, from building technologies to charging and vehicle to grid and all of that. So there are a lot of cool things in terms of stimulating new technologies and startups. And there's an important clean tech hub in Southern California that could also substantially benefit from quick moving agency that is not subject to the 3-year cycles of the California Public Utilities Commission. And with that, I'm happy to turn it back over to you, Linda.
Okay, thanks, Rafael. We had one question in the chat, and the question is, who needs to approve starting a CCA?
Oh boy, well, I think there are a number of people here who could answer that, right? So at the end of the day, it's the city councils of each city that are going to make that decision. And so community involvement to encourage council members to look at and seriously consider adopting a community choice energy agency is really the critical element. And it's now proven, as noted, Linda noted, with community choice energy agencies covering, over a quarter of the population, securing ratings from the rating agencies and so forth. There's really a proven track record that elected officials can turn to see, does this work?
Okay, great. We have a question from Sona Coffey, who is the Energy Sustainability Manager at Irvine, and she asked about energy efficiency incentives, and if you could speak a little bit to that.
Yeah, so we at Peninsula Clean, I should say that not every community choice energy agency is making the same decisions. And a lot of times there's local context that plays into why a particular community choice energy program might go in one direction versus another. In our particular case, we're in a service territory with many efficiency programs already active. And we said, by and large, that territory is that dimension is being well covered. What's not being well covered is electrification for building decarbonization and transportation, which still also needs help. And so that's where we have put our emphasis. But we absolutely recognize that efficiency is a very important piece of the puzzle. And so when we talk about things like building electrification, we also think about, well, how do we bring those pieces together when we talk about design approaches and how our incentives relate to other existing efficiency incentives. Now, other agencies like, let's say, MCE have made developed substantial energy efficiency programs. So that's also an option.
I think, I personally believe that's one of the great things about community choice. It does depend on your area. I know 3CE is doing a lot of incentives for agricultural commitment, which makes sense. They're in Central Coast. They are also looking at wind energy because it's great up there, right? Yep. And then I know even Redwood Community Energy had an offset program for their redwood forest for a while. And so I know there's differences. I know Silicon Valley is really into innovation, which makes sense. But one of the things we're excited about here in Orange County is the possibility of innovation. Are built out. We have so much in common in all our cities. We're built out. We have a lot of traffic. So there are some great things about joining together. So let's see. I'm looking at the time. Any other questions, Tristan? Did you see in the chat?
Yes, we have one from Tyler from San Clemente, who's been working on CCE in his city. And he says, thank you for a great presentation. I agree. And I was curious to learn more about PCE's incentives for solars. Is there an added credit for excess customer generation or perhaps a one-time rebate when customers add solar or storage?
Yeah, so we're doing several things. First of all, on net metering, we have an additional cent on the excess generation and the net revenue, if you will, that comes back to someone with solar. So that's number one. Number two is that we are providing an incentive. We have a partnership with Sunrun to deploy solar and storage systems on residential, single family homes, and eventually will grow into multifamily. And with that, there's incentive of up to $1,250 for doing so. And I noticed in the chat box somebody asking about resource adequacy. So somebody knows some of the issues that load serving entities have. Our partnership with Sunrun includes providing what's known as load modification, and that's a state recognized, change in our load to reduce our resource adequacy needs. And resource, for those of you who don't understand or aren't familiar with this lingo, resource adequacy is the additional capacity we have basically for emergency events. So the extreme weather events. Last year, there were some difficulties statewide on that. And so it's a very important question. So this is one strategy. There are a number of strategies that we're using around resource adequacy, including both, purchase of more resource adequacy, but also demand flexibility to reduce resource adequacy needs.
Great.
Thank you so much. I know some of this will be addressed with Jack Clark in the next presentation. I did want to mention that I just read that East Bay Community Energy just got a grant with 2 cities to turn contaminated brown areas into solar storage areas and EV charging stations. And some of the cities are going to adapt it for housing. So a win-win there in terms of how to use funds.
Yeah, and Linda, let me highlight a little or reemphasize the point. The creativity potential of community choice energy is enormous, and really it creates an opportunity to really drive that. So if you identify local community priorities, you can move very quickly on those through community choice energy.
Why you could give $5 million for COVID relief last year.
Exactly.
Okay, well, thank you very much. And thank you, Rafael. What we're going to do is hear from Jack Clark from Clean Power Alliance right here in Los Angeles. And then this will take us to about 5 o'clock. And then from 5 to 5:15, we're going to have questions. So if you have urgent questions and you have to leave before then, please let us know that in the chat. Okay? Thank you so much, Rafael. He's going to hang around and answer questions too.
Yes. Keep putting your questions in the chat and we're going to save those and ask them at the end. Jack, you want to share your screen?
Yes, I'd love to. Let me know if you see the full projector version here.
Perfect.
Yeah, okay. Well, good afternoon, everyone. It really is a pleasure to be with you. My name is Jack Clark. I'm Director of Customer Programs at the Clean Power Alliance. It's a pleasure to come on the heels of Rafael's presentation. I've known Rafael for quite a while now and echo nearly everything that he said. I can't agree with him wholeheartedly, but on 99% of everything, I completely agree with Rafael, and I love the work that PCE is doing. A little bit about myself. I am the first director of programs at CPA. We've been up and running now for about 3 years. So we're in a different phase of program development and implementation than PCE. So I'm going to take a little bit of a different approach with this presentation. But before I got to CPA, I was the Vice President of Sustainable Energy Use at DNVGL. Prior to that, I was working as a Deputy Director of Sustainable Energy at the City of San Diego. And then prior to that, I was a Director of Programs at the Center for Sustainable Energy. So I have, in my background, I've worked for for-profit organizations, local governments, as well as nonprofits. And I've been working with various stakeholders and local governments on program development for a number of years around California. I'm a former board member of the Local Government Sustainable Energy Coalition and just been working with industry and nearly everyone that's involved in program development and implementation for quite a while. So again, I'm thrilled to be with you all today. We consider, our portfolio of programs, local programs for a clean energy future. And I'm going to get into why we call it local programs here in a moment. Let's see. A little bit about CPA. We are the nation's top provider of 100% clean energy. We buy more renewable energy than anyone else. We serve more than 1 million customer accounts in both Los Angeles and Ventura counties. And we have nearly 300,000 customers on 100% renewable electricity rate plans as of today. Our customer demand for renewables is meeting California's clean energy targets ahead of schedule. And we're reducing more than 1 million tons of greenhouse gases annually. And by our estimation, we've created nearly 2,500 jobs through the work that we're doing to date. Much has been said on community choice aggregators in terms of local accountability and local benefit with revenues reinvested in the local programs. And I think that's a really important point to underscore. We're fairly large. I believe, the largest CCA in the state currently. As I mentioned, we have our service territory covers both Los Angeles County and Ventura County. And then within those counties, we have an additional 30 other member agencies or local governments that make up our member agency portfolio. These are all the local governments who have committed to becoming a community choice aggregator, and we've brought them all in, and we're working with all of them quite closely. This didn't happen overnight. We started with a number of local governments, and then more have joined us over the several years that we've been in operation. Let's see. We buy and sell power, we administer operations and programs, we manage data and risk, and we have a staff of under 40 individuals. So we're an incredibly efficient organization. We're still young, we're growing, but we're doing a lot of work, and it's an exciting place to be. Revenues after cost for power and operations plus reserve are pooled and invested into local programs and additional procurement. So we are actively, as Rafael said, reinvesting what we do into the communities that we're working with and serve. So what is a local program? I think one of the most important aspects of what CPA has done to date on programs is really get into the trenches on working with a number of stakeholders to prioritize what type of programs we want in our communities. And so we have a local program strategic plan. You can find it on our website. I'm happy to distribute that after today's discussion. But again, because of my background in working on programs in the past, I really wanted to come to an organization who was working with their communities wholeheartedly on designing programs and prioritizing those programs. So I took a snapshot of a little section out of our strategic plan, and it really encompasses what we believe is a local program. It's an opportunity for customers to be an active part of the clean energy transition. Local programs for a clean energy future is an important step in what CPA envisions as an ongoing process to empower its communities to join CPA in creating a greener and safer electricity system. CPA was formed by local communities, for local communities, and this group of local programs reflects that conviction. For me, that's so powerful because as Rafael, I'm sure, can attest to, we can build the best programs, but if nobody's activating or participating in those programs, then we're not doing what we're set out to do. And so if you get that buy-in from your communities early on, because they're part of that process, you're already off to an important start. One of the other important aspects, I think, on what we're trying to accomplish here at CPA is, think about this. It's a new organization. Who knows who you are? I mean, honestly, it's a new organization. We're only 3 years old. And so programs is an outstanding way to build trust with your customers, to be an extension of your brand with your customers. Through programs, you actually are reaching out into communities physically. Like Rafael said, we're bringing incentives and technical assistance. We're bringing our brand. We're bringing a trusted advisor. And in many ways, it's an important opportunity for us to really learn about what our priorities are from our customers, both residential, commercial, businesses, local governments, you name it. Here's a snapshot of one of those stakeholder events. So for the better part of a year, CPA was out in the community. Again, this is, dozens of local governments that make up CPA, and we were out in them all, trying to gain information from, our stakeholders, our residents, our businesses, on what types of programs and priorities they really had so that we can deliver on those priorities and those concerns. And in order to do that, a lot of what we had to do was really level set on terminology. There's a lot going on in the energy industry today. There's a lot flying around. And so we really wanted to focus in on, what is the definition on distributed energy resources? There's a level setting here on what these terms are, where these industries are. Some folks might not even know that these industries are up and alive and thriving in your community. You may not be all that aware of all that work that's being done. So DERs are resources that are close to the site of the consumption. And many of our programs are focused on distributed energy resources. And these can include solar photovoltaic, energy efficiency, energy storage, electric vehicles, combined heat and power, microgrids, demand response technologies. So the stakeholder involvement process was also a really important process to educate our community on what we were trying to accomplish as well. Additional terminology included behind the meter and demand response. Behind the meter refers to anything that happens on site, on the energy user's side of the meter. And this can be a commercial residence, it could be a multifamily building, it can be a commercial building or a business. What's happening and what do we want to try to accomplish there at the site? And then demand response. It's a change in the power consumption of electric utility customer to better match the demand for the power supply. So much now in program design, we're talking about behavior change. How are we actively engaging with these systems and these technologies? And really, a CCA can do all of these great things, but if we're not activating our communities and our residents, then we're not reaching our full potential. And so through programs, through stakeholder engagement, you really start to build that level of trust and understanding and connective tissue, which are really critical to success. And then electrification. Rafael touched a little bit about electrification, and simply it's referring to the process of replacing technologies that use fossil fuels, coal, oil, natural gas, with technologies that use electricity as a source of energy. And much like PCE, we'll be focusing on building electrification and transportation electrification quite deeply in the coming years. And so as a result of that nearly year-long stakeholder engagement process, our communities prioritized 7 programs, and I'm in the middle of launching them all at once. We're fast at work here. So we're talking about clean backup power for essential facilities. So each one of our member agencies will get a solar and battery storage system deployed at a critical facility that provides some type of critical use function within that community. We're working on that program now, and I'll get into a little bit more details on all of these. Demand response for energy storage. Peak management pricing is a behavior change demand response program for commercial customers. Public electric vehicle charging and building electrification codes. Community solar and 100% green discounts for folks who are considered underserved or disadvantaged communities. So many of these have risen to the top of our prioritization list. And then from there, we've categorized them into 3 buckets. And our first is resiliency and grid management. As I mentioned, each of our 32 member agencies will be a host to one solar and battery storage system at an essential facility. We're talking about climate change. Our buildings, have to adjust with our changing environment. We're talking about PSPS events and natural disasters and wildfires. We saw some slides early on in the webinar about the environment that's changing around us. So in program design, CCAs have the opportunity to be progressive, to recognize these changes in our communities. IOUs in some form or fashion, in some ways have not been able to be quite that nimble, but our environment is changing. And so within some of our program design, we're recognizing that, and we're working to respond to some of those changes and provide benefits to our communities. Within our resiliency and grid management bucket, we also have our demand response programs. Power Response is a pilot program currently, and we're launching that into full phase implementation later this year. And essentially, it's a demand response program for commercial and residential customers, where they'll receive incentives once they curb their electricity usage during certain times of day. Peak management pricing is another demand response program that's solely focused on behavioral change for businesses and local governments, where they receive bill discounts for participating, and then in exchange, they're asked to respond to elevated price signals during PMP events by reducing their consumption as much as possible. Our second bucket, much like Rafael has described, is electrification. And so we're actively launching public EV charging projects this year. So we're providing incentives to non-residential customers to install electric vehicle chargers that are available for public use. And we'll be leveraging the Cal EVIP program, which is a statewide program. Rafael mentioned, in the early stages of program development and implementation for CCAs, what are some easy wins? So us participating in a program like Cal EVIP is leveraging state funding to get more bang for our buck within our service territory by getting additional incentives out to our customers. There's also a particular carve out for many of our customers located in disadvantaged communities. All of our program design, we're actively looking at ways where we can reach all members of our communities in an equitable fashion. And then in terms of electrification for buildings, we'll be supporting and incentivizing municipalities to adopt local codes that require buildings to receive more of their power from electricity than natural gas through changes in building codes or adoption of REACH codes. Some of this work has been tried and tested around the state. And so in some ways, we're just taking best practices and making sure that they're deployed in our communities as well. And then our final bucket is local procurement. And in this example, we're talking about community solar or utility scale solar that's locally procured that can be offered to members of our disadvantaged communities. We've branded this bucket our power share, and really our community solar portion will allow us to develop just over 3 megawatts of solar projects literally in disadvantaged communities within our service territory, and allocate the energy produced by those projects to customers within a 5-mile radius. And this type of program is eligible for all CCAs. Every CCA around the state is looking at this program. It's under the auspices of the Public Utilities Commission. IOUs are also offering this type of program here. So again, this is another one of those, you can come out of the gate pretty quickly in launching something like this. And then the second leg of our Power Share program here is a little bit more of a market-based program, where it's not so, the focus isn't so much on developing those projects within the communities. It's more of a utility scale procurement type opportunity, but it allows us to build up to just over 12 megawatts of renewable energy anywhere in our service territory or in Edison's service territory. And then it allows us to use that energy that's produced by those projects to use that and disseminate that electricity to low-income customers living in disadvantaged communities anywhere in our service territory. And both of these programs here allow us to do two things. Well, a number of things actually, but two, I think, primary objectives here. One is that we can get our folks who income qualify in disadvantaged communities 100% clean electricity pretty quickly. And then the second aspect of that is that they get a 20% discount on their bill as well. And so when you think about where we are as a community in terms of the pandemic and even more economic stress in our disadvantaged communities, the time and the ability for a CCA to get out of the gate and provide these incentives and these discount savings to customers, and also increase the amount of renewable electricity that's offered to customers is incredibly timely. And so we're really excited about this program. We've actually launched the DAC GT portion of the program earlier this year, and so we're pretty thrilled about the progress already there as well. And that's the end of my presentation. I was trying to get us back on time. I think I did a fair job, but I'm happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
You did.
You
Tyler
did.
has one. He asked, could you expand on the demand response power program for residential and what sort of equipment would be required? You know, what do the incentives look like? So just a quick response on that one.
Sure. So right now we're in the pilot phase of that program, and we'll be going to full implementation later this year. But what we've learned in the pilot phase, and some of this, you know, we wanted to test and verify, but certainly smart thermostats are, I don't want to say cheap, but it's a cheap and easy way to get demand response from residential customers. You know, you've got smart thermostats, you've got the ability to interact and message through smart thermostats. So that's a technology that we'll be leveraging as well. Battery storage also is something that we really want to push for here on demand response, especially in residential. We'll be making and highlighting battery storage capabilities as a primary technology in our next phase of implementation. And then when we ran our RFP, you know, for implementation on that next phase, we were quite open to other technologies as well. You know, I thought maybe we'd see some water heaters, although we're not so concerned about gas consumption at where we are. Primarily the drivers right now are smart thermostats and battery storage. We'll be testing electric vehicle charging infrastructure in residential units as well, but I'm not sure that that will yield the results that we're ultimately looking for at scale.
Well, cool.
Hi, I have a couple questions I wanted to ask for Councilmember Serbo. He asked a couple questions way back. One was on, if you could comment on, Rafael, you had mentioned microgrid development and exploration in your communities. And then are any of the CCAs doing nuclear?
Well, I think Jack may have been the one to mention microgrids, but it's certainly something we're looking at. With regards to nuclear, obviously this is a very sensitive topic. We do not have any nuclear in our power purchase agreements. There has been an active debate about whether or not we should accept allocations that are available to us from the investor-owned utilities. It's a very complicated topic. And of course, on the one side, you know, it provides base load and it's carbon free. On the other side, there are all the issues associated with waste and so forth. I would note that, you know, it will be some time before we have enough storage for a completely clean, renewable grid. And so it's a difficult question.
Thank you. I had a question I wanted to ask, and just because I know, Jack, you have a default of 100% renewable. So customers are automatically opted in at 100% renewable. And I believe your rate is about 30% of customers do it. And I was wondering if you have seen companies opt in for that reason, for the reasons of ESG goals or social responsibility goals to meet their goals, because that is a question we get asked a lot by individual companies.
Yeah, we definitely are. It's you know, it's a great offering to have for companies, and I think you're exactly right. Their ESG goals are a primary driver there. I would also say that, you know, many of the companies have, you know, employees that are living in our service territory as well. You know, so there's a direct connection there. Yeah.
Rafael, I hear Facebook and Visa chose in your area. Is that correct?
Well, we're not supposed to provide information about specific customers, but we have a number of major customers that have opted to our 100% renewable product, including names you would recognize. And then beyond that, for our standard offering is 100% greenhouse gas free. So even the standard offering is a huge leap forward from a greenhouse gas standpoint.
Okay. Were there, yes?
I wanted to get back to Councilmember Servo's question again about the microgrids, because he wanted to know how many CCAs were deploying them and how do they acquire the land? I think that's an important question.
So I don't know, Jack, if you want to take a first stab there.
Yeah. I think we're not calling our critical facilities program necessarily a microgrid, but we are working to deploy solar and storage at municipal facilities. And having worked inside local government at the city of San Diego and deploying solar and battery storage, as a staff member with inside the local governments, it can be a real challenge, obviously, to find space. And sometimes the condition of the buildings and the facilities themselves are not quite ready for rooftop solar or any of the other infrastructure build out. So it can be a challenge. I honestly, in terms of finding space, sometimes partnering with folks nearby, that maybe have parcels that are adjoining to some of the sites, maybe a solution, but it's a tough nut to crack. And sometimes some of our sites don't get storage or solar because there are these types of site constraints.
Okay. I wanted to ask if somebody could speak to, I know this is on the minds of people, if somebody could speak about the bankruptcy in the bankruptcy that happened in Western Community Energy.
I'll comment on it. It's certainly been a point of concern. I would note a couple things that were particularly at issue with WCE. First of all, they were very new. And being very new, they didn't have a chance to develop reserves. And energy markets fluctuate, especially egregious in extreme weather events, where prices can soar 10 to 100 times normal price for power. So it's very, very important to get that groundwork in place to be successful. They have an unusually large low-income community. And as I'm sure most folks here know, that was a community that was particularly adversely hit by the pandemic. Many people were not able to pay their utility bills. And then we had the very extreme weather events, which of course are climate-driven events over last summer. And that combination was really what drove the bankruptcy. There might have been choices that could have been made earlier in terms of how they thought about building their reserves. I've heard secondhand, through our internal discussions, that they didn't prioritize that enough in their launch phase to address the risk factors. There are discussions about how they could be supported. There's still, nothing concrete that I'm aware of. It's very, very unfortunate, and also not likely a scenario, frankly, that Orange County would come anywhere near. From what little I've gathered here, the leadership of OCPA is taking a very thoughtful approach in terms of things like the discount level and building those reserves. And Orange County has a much more diverse community and economically much more stable. So it's extremely unlikely that we will see something like WCE again, hopefully.
Right. I think that's a really important point, though, because I know several cities have asked, why aren't the programs starting sooner? And building that reserve is really important for the stability of your program, but also in terms of credit ratings and cheaper energy. It's just a smart financial, decision. I did, oh gosh, I'm sorry, it escapes me. I can't remember. Just Tristan, do you guys see another question?
Yeah, there was a bunch. Sona Coffee had a wonderful question. What incentives are the CPAs able to offer member cities to adopt building electrification, reaching those codes? She's really interested in finding out more about, what the cities who are, going with the electrification building codes. So, and any kind of incentives that you give to member cities that are examples in your own, CCE would be great.
Yeah, we haven't quite launched that one. I know that Rafael is pretty far along in their building code incentive program. He can maybe touch on that, but I would say, just to come back to one program where we're providing incentives to our local cities, the solar and battery storage will be at no cost to our member agencies.
That's great.
And so, one of the important things, again, having worked with fire departments, having worked with police departments and Office of Homeland Security and staff that run cooling centers, is that, we're working to bring solar and storage at no cost on site and provide that resiliency to these local governments at these critical facilities. And then, from there that the ripple effect, value and benefit to the community at large extends well and beyond the financial benefit there as well.
Yeah, it's pretty great.
So that's one example, but I'll let Rafael answer the one on the building code incentives.
Sure. So building codes are incredibly important. It's one of the most effective levers we have towards moving towards building decarbonization. Early on, we heard from our local elected officials, some agencies saying, "Hey, we'd really like to take a look at this. Can Peninsula Clean Energy support this process?" And we did develop a pretty robust program that included technical assistance for code development, model codes that cities could use, a whole public process. We had over 300 attendees at workshops to inform the process, $10,000 per city that wanted to explore adopting all electric codes, and also for not just the building side, but also EV readiness. And we had substantial success. So in combination with our partner, Silicon Valley Clean Energy, this was a joint project. We have over half of the REACH codes, local building code enhancements, that have been adopted in the state. Now, that said, it can be local elected motivation and buy-in towards doing that is really central to the success of such a program. There are local context that really needs to be taken into consideration whether to undertake it. It's technically fairly complex. It doesn't have the economic impact that transportation has. For Southern California, for a variety of reasons, I don't know that I would recommend that as the first thing out of the gate. Yeah, you have SoCal Gas in your service territory, which would present challenges.
Yes.
I know there was a question earlier about why CCAs tend to choose more renewable energy. I know it does make residents happy, and I understand, because you're a nonprofit, you get a lower loan rate on electricity. So renewables are already as cheap as traditional sources of energy, but then with your added lower income rates, you can do it for cheaper. Do you want to speak to that at all?
Jack, do you want to take that?
I'm not quite sure I understand the question. Would you mind?
Why do CCAs choose more renewables as a rule?
As a rule compared to?
The traditional utilities.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I could tell you right out of the gate. I mean, climate action plans. I honestly, I think it comes from, the origin of the community's priority. I mean, having worked at a local government who is evaluating a climate action plan and evaluating, CCEs as an opportunity to really reach the renewable energy goals within that climate action plan, there were really no other opportunities to get there. And it was pretty fundamental. But I think that's community based, that comes from the local governments and climate action plans that ultimately feed up. Now, In terms of our procurement, as you mentioned, the costs are pretty competitive right now as well.
And I would build on that. So in addition to the attractiveness of the costs of procuring renewables, we don't have the baggage, frankly, of the past contracts and past practices and everything else that the investor-owned utilities have. And we have substantial leverage across our peer agencies. And in fact, Peninsula Clean Energy and a number of other agencies, and I don't know, I should know, Jack, of CPA. I think CPA is participating in CC Power. Are you guys participating in CC Power? Maybe not. You guys are the big kid on the block, so you might not need the added buying power. But anyway, a large number of community choice energy agencies have actually formed a joint program for procurement called California Community Power, and which has more buying power leverage than Pacific Gas and Electric, which is the largest investor-owned utility in the state. So we're very excited about that and the potential to drive not only conventional renewables, if you will, but also other very important areas like storage. We recently released a request for offers for long duration storage.
Great. I just wanted to mention that I just uploaded a screenshot of a Twitter feed that I saw that by 3C Energy, and they are they put out an RFP for 1 to 5 megawatts of solar, and that can be microgrids on top of huge buildings. And microgrids in, when I mentioned the contaminated brown spaces we have. So there is, even though we're a built out environment, there are possibilities for microgrid opportunities if we think outside the box. And I know that is happening in some of the CCAs. I also noticed we are at time, and I know there may be some people that need to get off the call. If you two are willing, we'll stay on and continue to answer questions. I did want to ask you, Margot, if very quickly you could share the slide we have for our 3 calls to action, because they are important. One has to do with solar, and if you own solar, this is going to matter to you. And there was a question about your picture, Rafael, that had gas at $2.39 a gallon. But no, that wasn't your picture. Okay.
That's what happens when you pull something off the internet. I wasn't looking at the numbers.
Yes. Okay. Okay.
We'll all go.
Yes. The point is, we're probably saving more than if gas is higher priced and more money is going to the gas companies. So it would benefit us more, it sounds like. But Margot, could you share that real quick?
Yeah, and you're muted, Margot. While she's sharing that, I say you got it? Are you ready?
Yeah, I've got it. I just have to.
I don't want to ignore. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Tristan.
I was just saying there were several other questions too that kind of speak to this call of action of people's, local residents going to their city council members and going, hey, we'd really like you to study a CCE program for our city. One person in particular asked about Orange and a couple of other cities. So we'd love to, before we all wrap up, is to talk about, what citizens can do to get CCE in front of their city council, and to address some of the things that city council members might say, like, oh, it's too expensive to join a CCE,
Right.
or it costs a lot of money to study it. But let's go ahead and look at the call to action.
So these call to actions are easy. If you go to climaterealityoc.com and you press on our action hub tab, our take action tab, there is opportunities for more education on community choice energy, and that's a great place to start. Just a video that Tristan actually produced that is wonderful, and some other things to read. So I would highly recommend that. Easy to do. There is a ton of information out there. Go to all the CCA websites and check out their programs. Great visibility and wonderful to see what the different CCAs are doing. The Save Solar campaign is the one I mentioned. Right now, the utilities, and this is another benefit of community choice agencies, they have a lot of power, and this is a way for us as a group in community choice agencies to help support solar and cleaner forms of energy. And so the solarrights.org is a website where you can go and look at the fact that the utilities are trying to take your net metering rate, your current net metering rate that you have on your roof for solar. So that will affect you. Please go there, learn how to send a simple email telling them what you feel about that. It's going to affect all of us in California. And the last one is my update meeting every other week. If you are interested in having your city join, come here and learn from us. We have a lot more time to talk about where you get started, share slides, things like that. So again, email me at lkteamtalk@gmail.com. So we'll put those links in the chat and we'll get back to the questions. Thank you so much.
I know Jeff has one, but real quick, Jack and Rafael, in working, I know you're focused on programs and implementing them in your cities, but just in short, what are some of the things that citizens can say about why they work so well? We have 23 CCAs right now serving over 11 million customers in over 190 cities here in California, saving millions, tens of millions of dollars. What are the reasons that you see are key to bringing a CCE to a new city?
Jack, you want to go first?
Yeah, and honestly, I'm going to harken back to my days at the city of San Diego, because I was heavily involved in evaluating whether or not the city should take on a CCA or become a CCA. And so I was involved in many stakeholder meetings. I was on the City Sustainable Energy Advisory Board at that point, where we're getting a lot of community involvement. And I think the key is getting your voice heard, and whether or not it's in community meetings, advisory boards, in front of councils or committee meetings. I think the arguments that were made in the past no longer hold water today. We've got many CCAs up and running, many that are quite healthy and doing amazing work. And I think the key here is that we are cost competitive, we are cleaner, and there is local control. And as both Rafael and I have just described, the benefit to having programs reinvest yet again revenue again into your community is an economic driver, which again feeds off of additional job creation and again builds these sustainable energy technologies and industries. So we're just continuing to reinvest the revenue that's generated by these organizations within the communities that they serve. And that in and of itself, really should speak to many of the arguments posed against CCEs.
Yeah, and I would echo all of that. So it's the economic angle, particularly both in terms of rates and in terms of local investments, and the accessibility and ability to customize what the CC does, to really fit the local community, as opposed to a largely unaccountable, inaccessible situation that the monopoly IOUs have.
I'd like to add maybe one more quick point, if I may, on that, and I'm sure Rafael's had this experience as well. The outstanding opportunity in having a community choice aggregator in your community means that you can leverage other resources too. In terms of programs and program design, we'll be leveraging other incentives and other financial resources outside of the revenue that we might already be investing in programs. I know Rafael has mentioned the California Energy Commission, the Air Resource Board, the Department of Energy. And then above and beyond that, you're talking about partnerships with industry. that, again, you can be really creative on. So it allows you a structure to even go outside of the revenue that you're generating, to bring even more into the community.
Yeah, we were, as an example of that, we were able to bring $12 million California Energy Commission funding to our service territory for EV infrastructure. And we wouldn't have been able to do that if we hadn't been here to, create the structure where that would have been possible.
Absolutely. And just, alone, businesses are saving on their energy costs. Schools are saving on those energy costs. So those funds that used to be allocated for the ever rising prices of energy are now available back into those businesses and those schools and those cities. So that's a key point. Jeff, I see you've been raising your hand and have been so patient. So please feel free to unmute yourself and ask a question.
Hey guys, how you doing? I was just wondering, and it's been alluded to a few times in these presentations, about the corporate utilities and how they're trying to maybe stop this or not. Does anybody know?
Well, there certainly early on was an extensive political effort to make it difficult or impossible to establish community choice energy programs, and then subsequent policies prohibited, let's say, the most overt such efforts, which is not to say that the investor-owned utilities are enthusiastic about having community choice energy programs in their service territory. So I would say that the relationships with the investor-owned utilities, at least from our standpoint with Pacific Gas and Electric, has improved dramatically now that it's a reality. But that may not quite yet be the case in Southern California. I don't have a feel for that.
Okay.
Yeah, I guess since I'm in Southern California, I could answer some of that. I have experienced some pushback, certainly. Again, I think to harken back to my days at SDG&E's or at the city of San Diego, the city of San Diego represented nearly 50% of SDG&E's customer base. So them departing in and of themselves was a huge impact. So yeah, we at that time we did see some pushback there. I would also say, though, from working with staff at Edison currently, that we are trying to coordinate on programs as much as possible. So I think once you essentially get kind of past that stage, I think there's a recognition that a CCA is here and it has a purpose now and the community is behind it. Once you get past that, what I've seen day to day is that there's a lot more cooperation, especially on programs and program design and those types of resources. So I think there's a positive track record there ultimately that we're starting to see as well.
Okay, well then a follow-up. Do you think they would try to absorb any of these so they could reach their renewable goal, but keep it the same supposedly? You know what I mean?
No, I don't know that is possible at this stage.
I have heard from Marin Clean Energy that the fact that CCAs exist and have these, important goals on renewable energies that are more, they want to reach before 2045 is giving the utilities incentive to rethink their traditional models and to move towards renewables more. And would you agree with that? It's just healthy competition, right?
Good.
I'll speak to it quickly. I think the industry at large continues to go through an evolution. And, from what I've seen over recent years, I think different IOUs maybe have a different perspective on what their future looks like as well. And so I think some of that is still playing out. And Rafael, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think a couple of years ago, there was a forecast where 80%, I believe, of the IOUs customers would ultimately transition to CCAs by a certain time frame. So folks are, we've got this growth in CCAs. I think that demonstrates more community involvement, more prioritization at the local level here. But I also think you've got customers and competition emerging and moving. And so, yes, I think IOUs are definitely in some ways, looking at their role maybe differently, and maybe, to your point, looking to add more renewables as well.
I have a very important question I wanted to ask, because I'm from Costa Mesa, and our council had a concern about the 2 votes on Irvine's board. And Rafael, you have 2 votes, right, in your program? Can you speak to that a little bit? Has that been an issue? How is that?
Yeah, so we have 21 jurisdictions, all the cities and the county of San Mateo County that launched Peninsula Clean Energy. The county was playing the role that Irvine is playing in Orange County, and the county has 2 seats on the board. I am not aware of any case where any concern has been expressed about that. And it has never been the case that there has been a vote that has been determined by the fact that there were 2 seats held by the county. It's a very collaborative endeavor. I would note it's a new learning experience, frankly, for all the elected officials to start dealing with energy, which is something wholly new, really from the scope of traditional, city concerns. So we have not seen any issues whatsoever in that. We were, the Peninsula Clean Energy was able to repay the loan that the county offered in faster time than projected. It has worked extremely well.
Right. I think that's pretty common that they pay off the loan. They're conservative estimates to start with, and they often pay off the loan quicker than they expect. So
yes,
that's all good news. Did anyone from Irvine want to share anything? I know we had Susan Son, the board member, she had to leave, but if anybody has anything they want to add, I'm not sure. I know, or if anyone wants to voice some other questions, that's fine too. I'm not sure who we have left on the call, so.
I know Tyler had one question. He's working on getting San Clemente to join the JPA. And he wanted to know, how difficult is it, with all the kind of different cities and counties to actually implement some of these programs like EV bikes for all and the charging stations? I mean, do you run into some challenges when you're trying to implement programs across, several cities?
Well, Jack and I might give somewhat different answers to this because Jack's dealing with a huge service territory, and it's a much bigger challenge that Jack's undertaking. For a small agency like ourselves and like Orange County, frankly, it can move very fast. So I was hired at the beginning of April 2018. 3 weeks later, I was before the board proposing programs that were approved, and that 2 months later, I was working on executing contracts. We took a very intentional sort of quick start posture. Now, Jack's discussion about really engaging the community is also really valuable. I think my personal opinion is you do both. You get something started quickly and you engage the community. And there are programs that can be executed very quickly. Things like event-driven things, EV test drives, the e-bikes program came together quite quickly. In 5 days was sold out. It was supposed to be a 3-year program. So there are things that you can do that will move fast.
Great. And Jack, we also have a question from Sonia. Sona, go ahead.
Oh, yes. Hi, everybody. It's Sona Coffey with the City of Irvine. I just wanted to jump on. Linda was asking if anyone from Irvine wanted to comment. And I won't speak on behalf of OC Power Authority, but just on behalf of the city and as a staff person who was working to bring this forward. Really thankful to your group for still, sharing this message and getting the information out there. And also to both Jack and Rafael for sharing all the details. We're looking now at this next phase for Irvine is our climate action and adaptation planning, and looking really to move forward with as aggressive a goal as we can. And we're, proposing, trying to see if there's support around a 2030 carbon neutrality goal for the community. And I think a big part of that is going to be our work with the CCE, so with OC Power Authority, and the ability for that entity to bring in 100% renewable electricity is the first option. But then the others is all these great programs that you're listing here as local community programs that we can offer. And I think that list of 7 or so measures that I caught on Jack's presentation and the talk around building decarbonization from Rafael, those are all things that we're looking anxiously to start incorporating as part of our climate effort. So thank you everybody for the information and for this group for the support.
I want to personally thank you, Sona, for so many. You have just stuck in there for so long, and you are a major reason why Irvine has a CCA. And I just thank you so much for all your patience. I think
I've been persistent over these years, but it's because there is so much community support for it, and really just a success from all the other cities and member agencies that have formed before us. So it's been an exciting ride for sure these past couple of years.
I have a question. What do you say to large companies that use a lot of electricity when they're struggling with moving from Edison to a CCE?
Well, I know from Peninsula Clean Energy standpoint, not only were our base rates lower than Pacific Gas and Electric, but we were have also been able to put in place beneficial longer-term contracts with some of our large energy consumers, which offered still better rates. So those are options that that they don't have with the IOU. So an immediate benefit for those companies.
Thank you.
What appealed to me about your program, Rafael, is that if I were a student, I would never be able to afford solar. But for the price of a cup of coffee a month, easy, I could have 100% renewable energy and be contributing. And a lot of college students are quite concerned about it. So I thought that's a wonderful perk. And you offer it even still slightly, it's only maybe $2 a month more on a, say, $100 bill, if I'm estimating right, if I remember right, I'm not sure, but I'm sure that fluctuates a little bit, but it's a pretty competitive rate.
Very, yes.
Well, I'm wondering if we should end. I don't want to keep you on too long, Jack or Rafael. Any last urgent questions or comments, statements?
Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much for coming.
Thank you for coming. Thank you for your support. Rafael, you respond immediately when I have a question. So many CCAs do that. I just email, I call the info number and I say, I'm looking for this information. Their renewable energy rate was higher than the competitor SCE, and that came up at a city council meeting. I messaged them, and within 24 hours, they gave me the answer that yes, their rate is lower, but that rate is only available to a select few. It's not available to everybody. And that is not something that they were saying. So there is more to the story when you just see the numbers, and it's really important to find that out.
Jeff, you're muted.
I'm sorry. So it seems like the corporate utilities are kind of fighting back through deceptions.
Well, it's not always the utilities. Sometimes it's community members who don't know all the answers and think they do.
Okay.
It is a constant education effort, and please talk about it. That is, it's a big change. People aren't used to it. but I think it's the way of the future. The utilities, my dream is that one day they will only focus on the wires, and that will make sense because it's a big job, and we can have more independent agencies and partnerships and community involvement.
And we're all here. We have fantastic PowerPoints on CCEs, and I know Jack and Rafael are always here. If you have city council members that want to engage on this issue, we're all here to get the discussion going and get them the actual accurate information so they can make the best decision for their city. So thank you. I think we had a great event.
Thank you.
Thank you so
Thank
much.
you.
Stay tuned.